The drift station floated at the edge of known space, a massive wheel of metal and light where dozens of alien species came to trade. Ships of every shape and color docked along its outer ring. Some looked like crystals that caught starlight. Others were smooth, organic shapes that seemed to breathe. Inside the station, beings with scales, fur, feathers, and stranger things walked together through wide corridors filled with the sounds of 100 different languages. Captain One stood on the bridge of the GCS Silent Accord and watched the station grow larger on the. His uniform was simple and practical, dark blue with minimal decoration. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had been traveling for 3 months to reach this place, humanity's first real step into the larger galaxy. Lieutenant One looked up from her communications console. She was young, barely 25, but her skills had earned her place on this mission. "Captain, the station controller is responding. He doesn't sound happy." "Put him through," One said. The shifted to show and face with too many eyes and clicking mandibles. The translator made his voice sound buzzing and irritated. "Human vessel, this is Tick, station controller. Your docking request is approved at port 17B. Follow the marked corridor precisely. Do not deviate." "Understood. Thank you for the welcome," One said with a smile. Tick's eyes blinked in sequence, which might have been confusion. The screen went dark without another word. "Friendly bunch," Pilot Sung Min muttered from his station. He was guiding the Silent Accord through the maze of ships with practiced ease. His hands moved across the controls with barely a thought. "I count 43 vessels in range. None of them are moving to intercept or scan us. They're just watching." "Let them watch," One said. He knew what they saw. A human ship, blocky and gray, without the elegant curves or bright colors of council vessels. It looked military because it was military. Humanity had learned hard lessons about coming to the stars unprepared. Engineer called up from the engine room. "Captain, I'm getting some unusual scanning activity. Nothing aggressive, but at least 6 ships are trying to peek at our systems. Should I activate countermeasures?" "Passive only. Let them look. They won't see anything useful," One replied. The Silent Accord had shielding that could hide its most important secrets. Let the aliens wonder what humanity brought to space. The ship settled into its docking port with barely a tremor. Through the windows, crew members could see aliens gathering to watch them arrive. Some pointed. Others turned away as if uninterested. Medical Officer Bai joined One on the bridge, her medical kit slung over one shoulder. "Permission to go aboard the station?" she asked. "I'd like to introduce myself to their medical staff, maybe share some information." "Granted. Take One with you. Stay in public areas and keep your communicators active," One said. He trusted his crew, but this was unknown territory. The 2 women left through the airlock. The artificial gravity shifted as they crossed from ship to station, and the air smelled different, full of scents they couldn't identify. The corridor beyond was crowded with aliens of every description. A few glanced at the humans, then quickly looked away. "Not exactly rolling out the welcome mat," One said quietly. They made their way to the central plaza, a vast open space with shops and restaurants rising in tiers around them. Holographic advertisements flickered in languages they didn't understand. Bai spotted what looked like a medical symbol and headed toward it, but a tall reptilian alien stepped into her path. "Humans," he said, the translator making his voice sound cold. "You should not be here. Your species has no business in council space." "We're probationary members," One said, keeping her voice polite. "We have every right to be here." "Rights," the alien hissed. "Your kind knows nothing of civilization. You bring warships to a place of peace. You carry weapons where none are needed. The council made a mistake allowing you entry." Bai stepped forward. "We came in peace. We want to learn and share. Isn't that what the council stands for?" The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace. Look at your ship. It is designed for nothing but destruction. We have evolved beyond such barbarism. Go back to your little world before you embarrass yourselves further." He walked away, leaving the two women standing in the crowded plaza. Around them, other aliens pretended not to notice, but one caught several watching from corners and doorways. Back on the Silent Accord, one was reviewing reports when his console chimed with an incoming message. The encryption code marked it as urgent and classified. He opened it and felt his jaw tighten as he read. The message was a distress call from a council research station in the system, 6 hours away at maximum speed. Pirates had attacked. They were holding 43 researchers hostage and executing them one by one to force the station's security codes. The council fleet was responding but would take 3 days to arrive. Sung Min had received the same message at his station. "Captain, we could be there in 6 hours, maybe 5 if I push the engines." "Contact station control," one ordered. "Inform them we're prepared to respond to the distress call." Minutes later, Tick's face appeared on screen again, but this time he was joined by another alien, a serpentine creature with scales that shimmered like oil. "I am Council Coordinator for this sector," the new alien said. His voice was smooth and dismissive. "Human Captain, your offer is noted and declined. This is a delicate situation requiring experienced negotiators. Your species lacks the diplomatic skills necessary." "Coordinator, people are dying right now," one said. "We can help." "You will stand down and wait for proper authorities," replied. "This is not a military engagement. It requires finesse you do not possess. Your interference would only complicate matters. That is my final word." The transmission ended. One sat in his chair and thought about 43 people dying while bureaucrats debated proper procedure. He thought about humanity's own history, all the times when waiting for someone else to act had cost innocent lives. "Sung Min, how fast can we undock?" he asked quietly. The pilot understood immediately. 2 minutes if we skip the formal protocols." "How are the weapon systems?" "Fully charged and ready, Captain," the engineer replied from below. One returned to the bridge and saw the expression on one's face. "Captain, what are you planning?" "We're going to help those people," he said simply. "The council ordered us to stand down. If we disobey, they could expel humanity from council space. Everything we've worked for could end." One stood and looked at his crew. "I know the risks, but I also know that we don't abandon people who need help. That's not who we are. That's not who we'll ever be. Now, everyone to stations. We launch in 90 seconds. The crew moved without hesitation. They trusted their captain. More than that, they understood what he understood. Humanity had learned through blood and fire that sometimes the right thing and the safe thing were not the same. And when forced to choose, they would always choose to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. The Silent Accord disconnected from the station and turned toward the system. Behind them, the station erupted into chaos as aliens realized what the humans were doing. Some called it madness, others called it arrogance. But on the bridge of the human warship, there was only calm purpose as they jumped into hyperspace, racing toward a confrontation that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth's children. The journey through hyperspace took 6 hours, but to the crew of the Silent Accord, it felt both longer and shorter. One spent the time reviewing everything they knew about the pirates. They were a violent species, expelled from the Council decades ago for refusing to give up their raiding ways. They preyed on research stations and small colonies, places with valuable equipment but weak defenses. One worked at her station, monitoring the distress signals that continued to pulse from the system. Each update made her stomach tighten. The pirates had already killed 5 hostages. They were demanding access codes to the station's data archives, which contained decades of scientific research. The researchers were refusing, and people were dying for it. "How can the council just wait 3 days?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. 3 days while people are being murdered. Bai looked up from where she was preparing medical supplies. Because they've forgotten what it means to fight for something. They've had peace for so long, they think negotiations can solve everything. They don't understand evil anymore. Sung Min checked their trajectory for the 100th time. We're going to get there, and there's going to be 12 hostile ships between us and those hostages. 12 against 1. I've faced worse odds, one said, though he didn't elaborate. His crew knew he'd served in the unification wars back on Earth, back when humanity was still fighting itself. Those were dark times that had taught humanity hard lessons about the cost of hesitation. His voice came through the intercom from the engine room. Captain, I'm getting some interesting data from our passive sensors. Those ships, they're using old Council military technology, probably stolen or salvaged. Their weapons are energy-based, standard plasma cannons. Their shields are decent but not great. They're relying on numbers and intimidation. And our weapons? One asked, though he already knew the answer. We'll go through them like paper, said with grim satisfaction. The silent accord dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Immediately, every sensor lit up. The research station was visible ahead, a small cluster of modules attached to an asteroid. Surrounding it like sharks circling prey were 12 ships. They were ugly things, all sharp angles and exposed weaponry, built for violence and nothing else. One of the ships turned toward them immediately. A transmission came through, audio only. Unknown vessel, you are entering a restricted area. Turn back or be destroyed. The voice was rough and amused, as if the speaker found the situation funny. One identified the speaker from the signal pattern. That's their leader. He's wanted by the Council for 47 counts of murder and 16 counts of station destruction. Open a channel, one ordered. The filled with the face of a pirate. He looked like a cross between a wolf and a lizard, with too many teeth and cold eyes. Behind him, the crew could see other moving around what was clearly a warship's bridge. A human ship, said his translator, making his laughter sound like grinding metal. How amusing. I've heard stories about your kind, primitives playing at civilization. You should leave now, little humans. This doesn't concern you. Release the hostages, one said calmly. Surrender your ships. You have 60 seconds to comply. The laughter that followed was harsh and mocking. Several others appeared on screen to join in the joke. One of them gestured at something off camera, and a moment later they heard a scream. A human scream. That was hostage number 6, said, his amusement fatting into cruelty. Would you like to hear number 7, or will you be smart and run away? You're one ship, we are 12. The mathematics are simple even for primitives. 50 seconds, one said, his voice unchanged. His expression shifted to anger. You dare threaten us? We've been raiding this sector for 20 years. We've destroyed Council ships twice your size. You think your one little warship frightens us? 40 seconds. Captain, they're powering weapons, Sung Min reported. All 12 ships are targeting us. Leaned forward, his teeth showing in what might have been a smile. Last chance, human. Run or die, choose quickly. 30 seconds, one said. The transmission cut off from the side. On the 12 pirate ships began to spread out, forming a net around the silent accord. They moved with practiced coordination, clearly having done this many times before. They were predators who knew their business. One's hands were shaking slightly as she monitored the tactical display. Captain, they're charging their plasma cannons, multiple targeting locks. They're not bluffing. Neither are we, one said. He looked around at his crew, saw the tension in their faces, but also the determination. They knew what was about to happen. They'd trained for this, drilled for this, prepared for this. But knowing and doing were different things. Everyone stay calm. Trust your training. Trust each other. 20 seconds. Sung Min counted down without being asked. The ships continued their approach, clearly expecting the lone human vessel to either flee or attempt negotiations. What they didn't know, what the entire galaxy didn't know, was that humanity had spent the last century developing weapons specifically designed to face overwhelming odds. Earth had been divided, each nation racing to build better, more efficient ways to destroy the others. The weapons that ended the unification wars were terrifying in their efficiency. And the Silent Accord carried those weapons. 10 seconds, Sung-min said. Bai had secured herself in the medical bay, ready for casualties. Was in the engine room, his hands on the controls for the ship's power distribution. One activated the combat recording systems that would document everything that was about to happen. 5 seconds. One's hand rested on the arm of his chair. His voice was steady, almost gentle. Weapons free, execute protocol. 3, 2, 1. The universe held its breath. Time's up, one said. What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for generations to come. The Silent Accord didn't fire warning shots. It didn't posture or make threats. In the span of 3 heartbeats, 6 ships simply ceased to exist. They didn't explode dramatically like in the entertainment shows. They didn't have time to send distress calls or scream warnings. One moment they were there, weapons charging, confident in their superiority. The next moment, they were expanding clouds of superheated gas and debris. The remaining 6 ships hung in space for precisely 2 seconds, their sensors struggling to process what had just happened. Then panic set in. Ships that moments before had been coordinating their attack now scattered in every direction, all formation and discipline forgotten in the face of absolute terror. They fired everything they had. Plasma bolts, missiles, electromagnetic pulses, all of it converged on the Silent Accord in a desperate attempt to destroy this impossible threat. They showed the incoming fire as streaks of light against the black of space. None of it reached the ship. The Silent Accord's point defense systems came online, a network of automated weapons that tracked and eliminated threats with inhuman precision. Plasma bolts were intercepted by counterfire. Missiles exploded harmlessly at a distance. The electromagnetic pulse washed over shields that had been designed to withstand much worse. Sung-min put the ship into combat maneuvers, following patterns he'd practiced 1,000 times. The Silent Accord moved through space like a dancer, each motion placing it exactly where it needed to be. Weapons that the never saw coming reached out and touched their ships. 2 more pirates vanished. A third lost its engines and began to spin, dead in space. The final 3 made a run for it, trying to reach hyperspace before they shared their companion's fate. They almost made it. Their jump drives were beginning to charge, reality starting to bend around them. Then the Silent Accord's weapons found them, and there were no more pirate ships in the system. From attack to silence took 90 seconds. One sat in his chair and looked at the tactical display. 12 red marks, all labeled as destroyed or disabled. 1 green mark, the Silent Accord, shields at 98%, all systems nominal. Not a single shot had touched them. 1, open a channel to the research station, he said quietly. A moment later, a trembling voice came through. This is research station. Who? What just happened? This is Captain 1 of the GCS Silent Accord. The hostile vessels have been neutralized. You're safe now. We're sending medical teams to assist with casualties. There was a long silence, then barely above a whisper, you saved us. That's what we do, one said simply. Back at the drift station, Tick stared at his sensor display as if it had betrayed him. The screens showed data he couldn't process, events that shouldn't be possible. Around him, the station's control center had gone completely silent. Every alien present had stopped what they were doing to watch the impossible unfold. The sensor feed from the system played out in perfect clarity. They'd been monitoring it since the human ship jumped away, mostly to document what everyone assumed would be a disaster. The Council would need evidence of human foolishness when they formally expelled Earth from consideration for membership. But that wasn't what the sensors showed. Replay the sequence, ordered, his smooth voice now rough with something that might have been fear. From the beginning, the tactical display reset. They watched the Silent Accord emerge from hyperspace, one small ship against 12 larger vessels. They watched the leader issue his threats. They watched the human captain give his 60-second warning. And then they watched what happened when that warning expired. 6 ships gone in 3 seconds, not damaged, not disabled, simply gone. The weapon's signature was unlike anything in the Council's databases. The energy readings were off the scale. Whatever the humans had fired, it had torn through shields and hulls as if they weren't there at all. "What weapon does that?" someone whispered. The recording continued. The remaining scattered and fired everything they had. The display lit up with weapon tracks, dozens of them, all converging on the human ship. A junior technician made a small sound of distress, clearly expecting to see the Silent Accord overwhelmed. But every single shot was intercepted, every missile destroyed, every plasma bolt neutralized. The human ship's defensive systems operated with a precision that suggested artificial intelligence beyond anything the Council employed. And while defending itself perfectly, the ship was also attacking, its movements through space calculated and efficient. 90 seconds from first shot to last, 12 hostile vessels eliminated, 0 damage to the human ship. The control center remained silent as the recording ended. Tick's many eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep disturbance among his people. Around the room, representatives from a dozen species stood frozen, their varied biologies all expressing the same emotion: shock. "How?" finally asked. "How is this possible? They were using modified Council military technology. Those ships had shields rated to withstand sustained fire from our own vessels, and the humans just erased them." "Should we contact the Council Military Command?" Tick asked. "They're already watching," said, gesturing to a priority communication line that was lit up and waiting. "Everyone is watching." On the main display, they could see the Silent Accord now docked with the research station. Human medical teams were crossing over to help the wounded. The researchers were sending thanks, their transmissions filled with gratitude and disbelief. One of the researchers, a scientist named Talnix, was being interviewed by station security. His voice came through clearly. "They came out of nowhere. The pirates were about to kill another hostage when the human ship arrived. Their captain gave a warning 1 minute and the pirates laughed at him. Laughed and then, I've never seen anything like it. The pirate ships just disappeared. No struggle, no battle, just gone. And the humans, they were so calm about it, like it was routine." The interviewer asked what the human crew said when they came aboard. The medical officer, she apologized that they didn't arrive sooner. Apologized. "They saved our lives and she was sorry it took 6 hours to reach us. What kind of people are these?" Throughout the drift, word was spreading. The docking bays fell quiet as crews stopped their work to listen. In the commercial districts, merchants paused their bargaining. In the residential sections, families gathered around displays to watch the recordings that were now being shared across the station network. The humans had done the impossible. More than that, they'd done it easily, as if 12 hostile warships were barely an inconvenience. And they'd done it to save people they'd never met, people from species they barely knew, while violating direct orders from the Council itself. In a bar near the main plaza, a group of merchants were having a heated discussion. "They must have gotten lucky," one insisted. "They were probably using old equipment. This doesn't mean the humans are actually superior." "Lucky?" another replied. 12 to 1 and they took 0 damage. That's not luck. That's superiority so absolute it's terrifying. Do you know what this means? They're probationary members. Probationary. If this is what they bring to the Council as novices, what are they hiding back on there?" A trader leaned in. "I heard a rumor that Earth was unified only recently, that they spent centuries fighting each other. What if they brought their war technology to space? What if every human ship is like that one?" The conversation died, as they all considered the implications. In her quarters, one was writing her report when Bai came to find her. The medical officer looked exhausted but satisfied. "We saved 38 of the hostages. 5 were killed before we arrived. Another 2 won't make it despite our best efforts, but 38 are alive because we got there in time." "The council won't see it that way," one said. "They'll say we violated orders, acted recklessly, risked an interstellar incident." "Let them say it," Bai replied. "Those 38 people don't care about council politics. They care that someone came when they needed help, that someone cared enough to risk everything for strangers." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they'd done settling over them. They'd crossed a line today. There would be consequences, but neither of them regretted it. On the bridge, one was speaking with the research station's director, an elderly named Mur. The scientist's scales were dull with age, but his eyes were sharp. "Captain, you've put yourself at great risk for us," Mur said. "The council will not be pleased, is already preparing charges." "I know," one said, "but charges aren't dead hostages. I can live with the council's anger. I couldn't live with knowing I had the power to save lives and chose not to use it." Mur was quiet for a long moment. "The council has forgotten something important. We've had peace for so long that we've confused peace with safety. We've assumed that because we don't fight, others won't either. But there are those like the who prey on our weakness. Today you reminded us what real strength looks like. Not the strength to destroy, but the strength to protect." "We don't want to be seen as destroyers," one said. "Too late for that," Mur replied with something like amusement. "The galaxy has seen what you can do. That can't be unknown now. But perhaps that's not entirely bad. Sometimes peace requires the presence of those willing to fight for it." After the call ended, one stood and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, across countless systems, the news was spreading. Humanity had arrived in council space with weapons that made the galaxy's militaries look like children with toys. They'd come claiming to want peace, but they'd brought warships that could erase entire fleets. The galaxy would have questions. Humanity would have to answer them, but that was tomorrow's problem. Today, 38 people were alive who would have been dead. Today, a human crew had shown the galaxy that Earth's children didn't abandon the helpless. Today, humanity had sent a message, written in fire and silence, that would echo across the stars. Sungmin appeared at his side. "Captain, Station Control is requesting our return. They're being very polite about it, but it's not really a request." "I know, plot a course back. Nice and slow, no sudden movements. Let them see we're not a threat unless we need to be." "Do you think they'll believe that?" Sungmin asked, "after what they just saw?" One smiled slightly. "No, but we have to try anyway. That's what it means to be human. We don't give up, we don't back down, and we don't stop trying to do the right thing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The Silent Accord undocked from the research station and began its journey back to Drift. Behind it, the debris from 12 pirate ships drifted in space, a monument to the moment when the galaxy learned that humanity had arrived and everything had changed. In the station's control center, Tick watched the human ship approach. Around him, security forces were preparing for their arrival, not to arrest them though charges had been filed, but to watch them, to study them, to try to understand what they were and what they meant for the future. "Should we increase security?" a junior officer asked. Tick's translator was silent for a moment as he considered. "No, if they wanted to harm us, we couldn't stop them anyway. Let them dock. Let them walk our corridors. Maybe if we show them respect, they'll continue to show us mercy." It was a strange thing to say about a species the council had dismissed as primitives just hours before. But after what they'd witnessed, after seeing what human weapons could do, mercy seemed like the most valuable thing the humans could offer. The Silent Accord approached the station, and the galaxy held its breath. The Silent Accord docked at Drift to a completely different atmosphere than when it had left. Ships that had previously ignored the human vessel now gave it wide clearance, as if afraid to come too close. Docking authorization came through in seconds instead of the usual lengthy wait. The automated system seemed almost eager to have the human ship secured and stable. One walked through the airlock onto the station and immediately noticed the change. Aliens in the corridor pressed themselves against the walls as he passed. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes of every description followed his movements. A group of merchants actually turned and walked the other way rather than pass him in the narrow hallway. One in Sungmin accompanied him, forming a small group that moved through the suddenly quiet station like a stone dropped in still water, ripples of silence spreading before them. It would have been amusing if it wasn't so unsettling. "They're afraid of us," one whispered. "They're afraid of what we represent," one corrected. "A change they didn't expect and don't know how to handle." A station security officer approached, a tall being covered in blue fur with too many arms. "Captain 1, Coordinator requests your immediate presence in Council Chamber 7. He said to tell you this is not optional." "I'll come willingly," one said. "No need for escorts." "I wasn't offering to escort you, sir. I was ordered to relay the message. Where you go and how you get there is your business." The officer departed quickly, clearly relieved to be away from the humans. The council chamber was a large circular room with seats arranged in tiers, designed to hold representatives from multiple species during diplomatic sessions. Today it held only a handful of beings, but they were important ones. Occupied the center position, his serpentine body coiled on a platform. Around him sat representatives from 6 different council species, all wearing expressions ranging from anger to fear to curiosity. "Captain 1 began, his voice formal and cold. "You stand accused of violating direct council orders, engaging in unauthorized military action, and recklessly endangering interstellar peace. How do you answer these charges?" One stood calmly before them. He'd been in worse situations. "I respond by requesting clarification of each charge." A military leaned forward. "You were directly ordered to stand down and not respond to the situation. You disobeyed. That's not complicated." "I was advised that the council fleet would handle the situation," one said. "I was not given a direct order by anyone with authority over my vessel. As captain of a probationary member species ship, I'm authorized to respond to legitimate distress calls when capable of rendering aid." The station broadcast a priority distress signal. Council law states that any ship capable of providing assistance is obligated to do so unless doing so would endanger their own crew. "You call what you did rendering aid?" another representative asked, his translator making his voice sound sharp. "You destroyed 12 ships. That's an act of war." "I responded to hostile forces actively murdering civilians," one replied. "Those ships were crewed by known criminals with extensive records of violence. They were in the process of committing murder when I arrived. Under council law regarding piracy and hostage situations, lethal force is authorized when civilian lives are in immediate danger." One stepped forward and produced a data pad. "We have documentation of every action taken, mission logs, targeting data, damage assessments, and legal justifications for each decision. Everything was done according to council regulations regarding emergency response and self-defense." Took the data pad, his expression unreadable. Around the room, the other representatives shifted uncomfortably. It was clear they'd expected the humans to be defensive or apologetic, not prepared with legal documentation. "These regulations were written for council species," said after a moment. "They assume a certain level of restraint and measured response. What you did was neither restrained nor measured." "With respect, Coordinator, the regulations specify that response should be proportional to the threat. 12 hostile warships against unarmed civilians represents an extreme threat. My response eliminated that threat completely while minimizing risk to my crew and the hostages. If anything, I showed considerable restraint by not pursuing the pirates' base of operations. The stood abruptly. That's enough dancing around the real issue. Captain, your ship's capabilities are far beyond anything we've seen from Council military forces. Your weapons destroyed ships that should have been able to withstand significant damage. Your defenses stopped attacks that should have overwhelmed a single vessel. We need to know what you're carrying. No, one said simply. The room fell silent. The looked like he'd been slapped. Excuse me. No, I will not provide detailed specifications of my ship's capabilities. That information is classified under Earth security protocols. Just as Council military vessels keep their specifications classified during probationary assessments, so do we. That's different, said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. We're trying to assess if your species represents a threat. And I'm trying to ensure my species' security, one countered. If you want full disclosure of our military capabilities, humanity will require the same from all Council species. Fair is fair. The representatives looked at each other, clearly not having expected this response. The human was right, by the Council's own rules. Probationary members were not required to disclose military specifications until full membership was granted. The Council had never worried about this before because probationary species typically had inferior technology. Now they were faced with the opposite situation, and their own rules prevented them from getting the information they wanted. They tried a different approach. Captain, help us understand. Why did you build ships like this? The Council maintains peace through economic integration and mutual dependency. We've evolved beyond the need for massive military force, but you come to us with warships designed for total warfare. Why? One was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because we know what happens when good people are unprepared. Because we've learned through immense suffering that peace is not the absence of violence. It's the presence of those willing and able to stand against it. You speak of suffering, said. What do you mean? Earth's history is written in blood, coordinator. We spent thousands of years fighting ourselves. Nation against nation, ideology against ideology, brother against brother. Our worst wars killed hundreds of millions. We nearly destroyed ourselves completely several times. And in all that darkness, we learned something important. We learned that evil exists, that there are those who will hurt others for profit or pleasure or power. And we learned that hopping they'll stop, or negotiating with them, or waiting for someone else to act, these things don't work. The only thing that stops evil is someone willing to stand against it, with the capability to make that stand count. So you admit your species is violent, a representative said. We admit our species understands violence, one corrected. We don't seek it, we don't glory in it, but we don't run from it either. We face it prepared and capable so that others don't have to. Uncoiled slightly, a sign of thought among his people. And the hostages, you risked everything for them. You risked humanity's place in the Council, you risked war, you risked your lives. For strangers. Why? Because they needed help, one said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because we had the power to save them and they would have died if we didn't act. Because that's what you do when you have strength. You protect those who can't protect themselves. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, a representative from a species one didn't recognize spoke up, her voice soft. In all my years serving the Council, I've never heard anyone describe military power as a tool for protection rather than conquest. You truly believe this? It's not belief, it's reality, one said. Power without purpose is just violence. But power used to defend the innocent, that's justice. That's what separates soldiers from murderers, warships from pirate vessels. We built the Silent Accord not to conquer but to ensure we'd never again be helpless while others suffered. Looked at the data pad one had provided, scrolling through pages of documentation. The legal justifications were solid. Everything the humans had done was technically within Council regulations, even if the scale of their response was unprecedented. And more importantly, they'd saved 38 lives that would have been lost otherwise. "This hearing is concluded," finally said. "Captain 1, the charges against you are being reviewed. You will remain on station pending a decision from the full council. That is all." As one and his crew left the chamber, they could hear urgent conversations starting behind them. The council representatives were arguing, voices rising and falling in a dozen different languages. The humans had presented them with something they'd never faced before, a species that was simultaneously more powerful and more principled than anyone expected. Walking back toward the silent accord, one spoke quietly. "Captain, that could have gone worse." "It could also have gone better," one replied. "But we told them the truth. What they do with it is up to them." Unknown to them, their words in the chamber were already being broadcast across council networks. The recordings were spreading through the galaxy, carried by news services and passed from being to being. Humanity's captain had stood before the council and explained why Earth built warships. He'd spoken of suffering and learning and the duty to protect the weak. And across 100 worlds, beings who had never thought about such things before were beginning to ask questions about their own safety and who would protect them if danger came. The galaxy was changing, one thought at a time. 3 days passed while the council debated behind closed doors. 3 days during which the crew of the Silent Accord remained on station, neither prisoners nor guests but something in between. They walked the corridors freely, but always with eyes watching them. They spoke to anyone who would listen, but conversations often died before they started. Yet slowly, things began to change. It started small. A merchant approached Sung Min in the market district and asked questions about Earth. Not hostile questions, but curious ones. What was it like? How did humans live? The pilot answered honestly, describing cities and oceans, mountains and plains, the diversity of cultures that made up humanity. The merchant listened intently, then thanked him and left. An hour later, 3 more merchants appeared with similar questions. Bai found herself sought after by medical personnel from a dozen species. They wanted to know about human trauma medicine, emergency procedures, how she'd managed to save so many of the hostages when their injuries had been so severe. She held an impromptu seminar in one of the station's public areas, sharing knowledge freely. By the end, she had requests for formal exchanges from 5 different species' medical academies. One discovered that the station's communication logs were filled with queries about humanity. Other species wanted to know about Earth's history, culture, military, everything. Some were frightened, yes, but others were fascinated. And some, she noticed, were hopeful. Species that lived near dangerous sectors, that had suffered from pirate raids or aggressive neighbors. They saw in humanity something they'd been missing, a willingness to fight when fighting was necessary. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A delegation arrived at the Silent Accord's docking port, announced but unscheduled. One met them at the airlock. He recognized several faces from the research station. Mer led the group, the elderly moving slowly but with purpose. Behind him came scientists and researchers from multiple species, all of them survivors of the pirate attack. They carried something between them, a carefully wrapped object that pulsed with soft light. "Captain 1, Mer said formally, "we have come to thank you properly." "That's not necessary," one began, but the old scientist raised a hand. "It is necessary. More than necessary, it is required by our conscience. You saved our lives at great risk to yourselves and your species standing in the council. This cannot go unacknowledged." He gestured, and 2 researchers brought forward the wrapped object. When they removed the covering, it revealed a crystal sculpture, intricate and beautiful, carved with images that told a story. Ships in danger, a lone vessel arriving, lives saved. "This is made from asteroid crystal native to the system," Mer explained. "We commissioned it to commemorate what you did, not just the rescue, but what it represents. The idea that strangers will help strangers because it's right. That strength can be used for protection instead of conquest. That some people still remember what honor means." One accepted the sculpture carefully. We'll display it on our ship, so we remember why we do what we do. One of the younger researchers, a female, stepped forward hesitantly. Captain, may I ask something? When you came to save us, did you know you would win? Were you certain? No, one said honestly. We believed we could, but certainty in combat is impossible. Things go wrong, equipment fails, luck matters. We came because you needed help, not because victory was guaranteed. You risked death for us, she said, wonder in her voice. For strangers. Yes. Why? It was the same question everyone kept asking in different ways. One had given various answers, but standing here before people he'd saved, he gave the simplest and truest one. Because someone had to, and we could. That's enough. The delegation left, and word spread quickly about the gift and what was said. In the bars and gathering places across the station, the story was told and retold. The humans who risked everything for strangers. The captain who said someone had to, as if it explained everything. And perhaps it did. That evening, one was summoned to a private meeting with. The coordinator's office was smaller than expected, more personal. Was alone, without guards or witnesses. Sit, Captain, the said, gesturing to a chair designed for beings with spines. This conversation is unofficial. One sat waiting. The council has made a decision, said, but before I tell you what it is, I need to understand something. When we first met, I dismissed your species as primitives playing at civilization. I was wrong, but I need to know if I'm wrong about something else too. Are you conquerors? Is this show of protection and honor just a mask for expansion and domination? No, one said simply. We've done conquest. We've done domination. We did it to ourselves for thousands of years. We know exactly where that road leads, and we've chosen a different path. But you bring warships. We bring protection. There's a difference. Was quiet, his scales shifting in the light. The pirates, the ones you destroyed, they were more than random raiders. They were scouts and enforcers for a larger criminal syndicate that has plagued Council space for decades. We've lost thousands of civilians to their attacks. The Council fleet has engaged them dozens of times with limited success. They're smart, they're mobile, and they know how to exploit the gaps in our defenses. You said we're scouts, one noted. Yes. Piracy reports in this entire sector have dropped by 40% in 3 days. Apparently, watching 12 ships get erased in 90 seconds has a chilling effect on criminal confidence. The syndicate is pulling back, consolidating, rethinking their operations. For the first time in years, research stations and small colonies can operate without constant fear. I'm glad we could help. You did more than help, Captain. You changed the equation. For decades, the Council has maintained peace through economic integration and careful diplomacy. We've assumed that because we evolved beyond violence, everyone else would too. But that's not reality. There are species like the who prey on weakness and respect only strength. We've been sheep hopping the wolves would become vegetarian. Leaned forward. And then you arrived. Humans, with ships we can't match and weapons we don't understand. You could have used that power to take whatever you wanted. Instead, you used it to save people you didn't know at great risk to yourselves. Do you understand what that means to species that have felt helpless? I can imagine, one said. No, I don't think you can. Not fully. In the 3 days since, the Council has received 47 requests from member species asking for human security patrols in their sectors. 47. We've never received that many requests for anything. Species that barely acknowledged your existence now want you watching their borders. What does the Council want? One asked. That's the question, isn't it? Expression was unreadable. Some want you expelled. They fear what you represent. Change, uncertainty, the end of the comfortable peace we've enjoyed. Others want to study you, understand your technology, maybe steal it if possible. But a growing number, Captain, want you to stay. They want humanity as full members. More than that, they want you on the Council Security Committee. Security Committee. It's a ceremonial position mostly. We haven't had a real military threat in 50 years. Our security forces are basically police. But after what you've shown us, after the rescue, people are asking if maybe security should mean more. If maybe we need protectors as well as negotiators. And if we accept, then humanity becomes the first species to join the Council with known superior military capability. You'll be watched constantly, suspected always, and responsible for the safety of billions who don't fully trust you. It will be difficult and thankless, and you'll probably regret it. One smiled slightly, sounds like being human. Made a sound that might have been laughter. The formal announcement will come tomorrow. Your probationary status is being lifted. Earth is offered full council membership, with a seat on the security committee. The vote was close, but the fact that you saved those hostages instead of starting a war convinced enough representatives that you can be trusted with power. We won't let you down. See that you don't. Because if you do, if humanity proves to be the threat some fear you are, the entire galaxy will unite against you. You'll face not one enemy but hundreds. We understand. Unwound from his platform and moved to the window looking out at the stars. You asked me earlier why we've been content with weak defenses. The truth is, we were tired, Captain. Tired of fighting, tired of war, tired of violence. So we built a civilization based on the hope that if we were peaceful enough, everyone else would be too. It was naive, but it was all we could imagine after so much suffering. I understand that, one said. Earth felt the same way after the Unification Wars. We were ready to give up fighting forever, but then we realized something. Peace isn't the absence of the ability to fight. It's the choice not to use that ability except when absolutely necessary. You need both, the power and the restraint. And you believe humanity has both. I believe we're learning, we'll make mistakes, we'll stumble, but we'll keep trying to do better to be better. That's all anyone can do. The next morning, the announcement was made across council networks. Humanity was granted full membership. Captain One would represent Earth on the Security Committee. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Some celebrated, others protested, but no one could deny that something fundamental had shifted. On the bridge of the Silent Accord, the crew prepared for departure. They'd been assigned to patrol the outer sectors, the dangerous areas where pirates and raiders operated. 6 alien ships had volunteered to accompany them, not as guards but as partners. Species that had dismissed humanity days ago now sought their protection. One was processing requests for security escorts. Captain, we have more requests than we can possibly fulfill. Everyone wants a human ship in their sector. Tell them we're working on it, one said. Earth is already building more ships, training more crews. We'll do what we can. Sung Min was plotting their course home. Sir, we're being given a full honor escort to Earth. 12 council ships want to accompany us to formally welcome humanity. It's unprecedented. Bai appeared on the bridge with news of her own. Captain, I've been invited to teach at 3 different medical academies. They want to learn our emergency procedures. I'd like to accept if you'll approve. Approved. We're not just here to fight, we're here to help in every way we can. As the Silent Accord prepared to undock, his voice came through from engineering. Captain, I'm reading some unusual activity in our sensor logs. Multiple ships have been trying to scan us for days. They're getting more aggressive about it. Let them look, one said. They won't see anything useful, and maybe it's good that they're curious instead of hostile. The ship pulled away from Drift Station, surrounded by its honor guard of alien vessels. On every screen across the station, people watched them go. The humans who had arrived as unknowns and left as legends. The species that had shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. Not the power to destroy, but the courage to protect. As they jumped to hyperspace, one thought about everything that had happened. They'd come to the council seeking acceptance and found distrust. They'd violated orders and made enemies. But they'd also saved lives and made allies. They'd shown the galaxy that humanity didn't abandon people in need. And in doing so, they'd sent a message that would echo across the stars for generations. A message written not in words but in actions. A message that said humanity had arrived, that they brought both strength and compassion, that they would stand against darkness wherever they found it. The galaxy had met a human warship, and it had brought everything to a dead silence. Not the silence of fear alone, but the silence of recognition. The recognition that something new had entered the cosmic stage. Something dangerous and kind, powerful and principled, capable of terrible violence, but choosing instead to protect the weak. In the weeks and months that followed, that message would spread. Human ships would patrol sectors that had known only fear. Human diplomats would forge new alliances. Human teachers would share knowledge freely. And slowly, the galaxy would learn what Earth's children had always known, that the greatest strength is not in the weapons you carry, but in the choice of when to use them. The Silent Accord and its crew returned to Earth as heroes, but they didn't see themselves that way. They'd simply done what needed doing, what honor demanded, what compassion required. They were humans, and that meant standing up for others, even at great cost to themselves. It was who they were. It was who they would always be, and the galaxy, having met them, would never be the same.